Jointo?
Yes,
Jointo?
yes.
Yeah, he's
Yes.
joining. Just wait, wait for a few seconds. He's just logging in.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Hmm. Professor Kalam, should I start?
Yes, I think you can start. No problem.
Okay, okay. So, good evening, all. We all know that pandemic constrained our lives in every respect, but at the same time, it has given us a chance to enjoy such a wonderful series of lectures, sitting comfortably at the homes. I personally enjoyed every bit of the lecture series, and I am sure that every participant experienced the same. Needless to say that the field theoretic view of world is absolutely necessary to understand the fundamental laws of nature, and therefore without losing a bit of extra time, let's welcome our honorable speaker, Professor Alam, to deliver his ninth lecture of this series, and hopefully it will be continued more, at least to have some details about the QED. Professor Alam, please.
Okay, thank you, Janto, for those kind words. Yes, I'll today introduce the QED. But before I start, let me just recapitulate this. This S matrix, which I have introduced, it involves the time order product of the interaction Hamiltonian. And this scattering matrix expression for this scattering matrix will be valid for any interactions for perturbative calculations. Like for scalar field theory, it will be also valid for QED or any other kind of interactions. Just you have to replace that HI, the interaction Hamiltonian, by your choice of interactions. So this expression is very general. So far we have applied this for phi-4 theory. Today I'll show you how you can also apply this for the QED. Now only this HI will change and the fields will change, but this expression is very general. It was derived from the Dirac picture, that, so it will be valid. And this S matrix takes a state, initial state to Si, and in the detector, if you are looking for a state F, then you just take the projection of that, they take the matrix element of Si with this F, and you get the scattering amplitude. And you know that if you know the scattering amplitude, you can calculate the scattering cross section. And that scattering cross sections, I have derived the formula in detail yesterday. The expression for the differential cross sections, d sigma d omega, which is measured experimentally. And this expression yesterday I have also applied for the lambda 4 interactions. And let me just then start today from QED. Okay, just I'll show you the expression. This expression is a very general expression also for two body going to two body scattering cross sections. Only thing is that see this MIF, the I going to F, this matrix element will be going, will be changing if you go from phi-4 to QED interactions, and this momentum of the particles will be changing because the particle will have different mass, there will have different spin and all that, and center of mass energy of course is your choice at what energy you are colliding the particles. So today I am going to discuss about the QED. Formalism actually is already developed, everything is already there. Only thing is that I will start from the interactions Dirac equations, but Dirac equations in detail, its properties of its solutions and all that, maybe we can discuss in a later stage. But let me just introduce you to the Dirac equation today. Dirac equation, initially this, as we mentioned in the very first lecture, that the Schrodinger equation fails to describe a system where there are creation of annihilations of particles. Then there are Klein-Gordon equations historically, and then the Klein-Gordon equations had two problems. One, was the probability density was not positive definite, and the other problem was that it has negative energy solutions. Now, probability after that, and I have also mentioned that this Klein-Gordon equations actually it will be valid for a spin zero particles, right? Now, for spin half particles like electrons, we need a different equation, and that equation which describes the motion of electron is Dirac equations. And in Dirac equations, you know, it is written as I gamma mu, del mu, as I have already defined, it is the contains the spatial, temporal and spatial derivative, right? It is like a 4 vector. Gamma mu is a matrix minus m, mass of the electron, let us say, operating on psi is giving you 0. So this is a first order differential equations. I gamma mu will be a 4 by 4 matrix. I will tell you what is this 4 by 4 matrix in detail. M is the mass and operates on psi and give you 0. That is the Dirac equations. In terms of, you know, space and temporal and spatial derivative, if you break gamma 0 delta 0, gamma j delta j minus m equal to 0. This mu index varies from 0 to 3. There are 4 values for this index, and I can write j for this spatial index 1, 2, 3. So when I am writing gamma j delta j, this contains 3 terms: gamma 1 delta 1, gamma 2 delta 2, and gamma 3 delta 3. And these gamma matrices are the 4 by 4 matrices actually. This is gamma 0 is 0, 1. This one actually is a 2 by 2 matrix, right? 1, 0. So this is a unit matrix. And gamma I means gamma 1, gamma 2, gamma 3 are defined as 0, sigma I minus sigma I 0. And sigma I is nothing but the Pauli matrices that you all know. Just let me make you a comment here that this gamma u, you may ask why gamma mu needs to be a matrix, why it cannot be a just a 4 vector like, you know, p mu, x mu, these are 4 vectors. Why it cannot be like a 4 vector? It cannot be a 4 vector because if you have a 4 vector, then you have a choice, you know, the vector will indicate some direction in space. And if you introduce here a vector, then that will not make the equation Lorentz invariant. You need a matrix. This we have not discussed. I am just starting from the Dirac equations, but there are a lot of interesting physics which we can discuss for Dirac equation in future, right? Now, this is the Dirac equation, as I said. Now you may ask a question. Suppose I want to derive the Dirac equations from an Euler-Lagrange kind of equations. Then you may ask a question that what should be the Lagrangian that will give me the Dirac equations, right? So the simple example is that this lambda Dirac, this Lagrangian for the Dirac equation should be psi bar I gamma mu del mu minus m psi, right? If this is the Lagrangian density, then for this Lagrangian density, I can follow the same procedure. I will write down the expression for the action, and that action I will extremize. I will give the Euler-Lagrange equation. And if that Euler-Lagrange equation, if I put this Dirac-Lagrangian, I will get the, you know, I will get the Dirac equations. This is what I will get. So I am always emphasizing or giving emphasis on Lagrangian because I need to quantize it. So given this Lagrangian, I can write down the expressions of action, get the Euler equations by extremizing it, and then in that Euler-Lagrange equation, if I put this Lagrangian, I get back the Dirac equations which I wrote in the beginning of this slide. Now the Dirac equation is this. Now if you know the Dirac equations, this is the free Dirac equation. So this will describe the motion of the free electron. And there are, you know, behind this discovery of this Dirac equations, there are a lot of interesting stories. You can read the book by Steven Weinberg, Quantum Field Theory, the first volume, where, you know, the background history is given very nicely. At this moment, I don't have the scope to go to that history, but it is very interesting. You will see in one evening, it seems the idea came to Dirac's mind and all that. This interesting story is there. Okay. Anyway, so now this is the Dirac-Lagrangian which I got. Now I ask a question. How does this L, this Dirac-Lagrangian, will transform under a local gauge transformation? So psi, the Dirac field, I am writing this as e to the I alpha x psi, right? And this psi bar which I have defined here, this psi bar is just the psi. It takes its, you take its adjoint and multiply from right by gamma 0. That is the psi bar. So gamma 0 is also given there. This is gamma 0. And the psi is the solution of the Dirac equation. So psi bar is nothing but psi dagger, you call it, and then multiply that from gamma, right from gamma 0. then you get psi bar, right? So, and that appears in the Lagrangian psi bar I gamma mu del mu minus m psi equal to 0. That is the Lagrangian density. Okay. Now, psi, if suppose I take now I want to take a local gauge transformation of this psi. Psi is e to the I alpha x psi. So then psi bar will be psi bar going to e to the minus I alpha x, because there is a complex conjugate I have to take, right? Now, this alpha is a function of x in shorthand notation, but x is a 4 vector. It contains time and spatial derivative. So alpha is a function of t and x. Now, you see, suppose I want to see how this Lagrangian density, which I have written here, will change, right? Psi bar I gamma mu del mu minus m psi. How it will change? You see, psi bar psi will not change. This psi bar m psi, this term will not change, because it will transform like psi bar is psi bar going to psi bar e to the minus I alpha x, and psi is e to the plus I alpha x psi. The e to the minus I alpha and plus I alpha will kill each other and get you a 1. So psi bar psi will remain constant. Trouble will come with the derivative term. That is a del mu term. And you know, derivative, when you take the derivative of any function, you need to know the function at certain point where you're taking the derivatives and in its neighborhood. So you need to know the functions in for one variable. If you are working with one variable, you need the functions for 2 values of that variable. Like if you take the derivative, phi of x plus h minus f of x, and then you divide by h, then you take limit h tends to 0 to get the derivative. Main point is that if you have a derivative involved, then the derivative will involve functions at 2 different points. And if you define a need the function at 2 different points, now you look at this, you see, then you need psi r e to the I alpha x psi at x, but when you take the derivative, you need psi at a different point and also alpha x at a different point. So the phase transformation at the 2 points will be very different, and as a consequence, they will not cancel each other. And let us see that that it will not really cancel. So del mu psi will be, if you take the derivative, it will be the e to the I alpha psi. So you take the derivative, keep e to the I alpha same, and del mu psi plus e to the I alpha, and now there will be derivative term with respect of alpha, del mu alpha, because alpha is a function of space time. Now, when you put this in your original Lagrangian, what will happen? This del mu alpha term will not be cancelled, because that is a new term which will not be cancelled. Now the question is, so by this local gauge transformation, my Lagrangian should not change, it should remain same. Then the question is, how do I cancel this del mu alpha term? Now what you can do here is that you can define a derivative which is called covariant derivative, right? That is a very more elegant way to introduce the interaction, but this is the simplest way we can do here. Now we introduce a covariant derivative which is defined as del mu, original del mu minus I e a mu, where I am introducing a new field a mu, where this a mu under the gauge transformation, my psi is changing to e to the I alpha psi, and I am assuming that my a mu will change under the gauge transformation as a mu plus 1 by e del mu alpha. So this is how psi changes under the local gauge transformation, and this is how my a mu will change. Okay. Now let me just calculate this quantity then. I had originally psi bar I gamma mu del mu psi, right? And when I tried to see how this will change under the local gauge transformation, I had a extra term del mu alpha, which was not keeping my Lagrangian, giving my Lagrangian invariant. Now I have replaced that by d mu, where d mu is given in terms of del mu and a new field a mu, and I also know how this a mu field will transform. So let me take the transformation of psi bar. I know it will go as psi bar e to the minus I alpha, gamma mu will remain gamma mu. Now del mu, it contains a d mu contains a del mu. I know what will be the del mu of psi. It will give me 2 terms, and this del mu alpha terms, which is coming from the derivative, is here. And then I also know how a mu will transform. So I put how a mu will transform. Now when you do that, you will see that del mu alpha term has cancelled each other. Now that del mu alpha ham term has cancelled each other, and then my psi bar I gamma mu d mu psi is remaining invariant under the local gauge transformation. So in place of, in the Dirac-Lagrangian, if I in place of del mu, if I take this covariant derivative d mu, then my Lagrangian is invariant under the local gauge transformation. But when in del mu, what I have done, I have introduced a new field, right? I.e. a mu, right? And this a mu must be a 4 vector because del mu is a 4 vector. So I have introduced a 4 vector field here, right? And if you again from d mu, if you want to write down your equation back to in the form of del mu, then you see there is a term E psi bar gamma mu psi, right, times a mu. And psi bar gamma mu psi, this is nothing but the current, Dirac current, and a mu is the vector field. So this term is actually telling you the interaction of the Dirac field with a vector field. And it can be shown very, elegantly by using the method of comparator. This a mu field is nothing but the Maxwell solution of the Maxwell equations. It is also a 4 vector. It has a scalar component, a temporal component, which is phi, the electric potential, and the its 3 vector special component is the magnetic potential. So it is a beautiful approach is that I have taken a free Lagrangian and I have demanded that my free Lagrangian must be invariant under local gauge transformation. If I want to keep it invariant, I am bound to introduce interactions. That's it. And this is a pillar of the modern particle physics, modern physics, you can say. You don't have to put the interaction by hand. Only demand is that my Lagrangian should be invariant under local gauge transformation. So that gives me the interaction, right? So this is the interactions which you get. Now, a mu is a new field, right? A mu is a new field. So this psi bar I gamma mu del mu minus m psi is a free Lagrangian for the fermions, spin-half fermions, right? Like the electrons and positrons, or muons and antimuons, right? And this is the interaction between the vector field and the fermion field. Then you may want also a free part of the Lagrangian for this a mu field. And the free part of that field, it can be derived, it is minus 1 by 4 f mu nu, where f mu nu is nothing but the Maxwell Faraday tensor, del mu nu minus del nu a mu. This is Maxwell Faraday tensor, right? And you can see whether this is the correct Lagrangian density for the Maxwell equation or not. So you write down minus 1 by 4 f mu nu in terms of the field a mu, right? You do some manipulation. This is done in very detail here. You will see that your Lagrangian density will be minus half del mu nu minus del nu a mu. Now you put that Lagrangian in the Euler-Lagrange equation. So once you know the Lagrangian density, again what will you do? Procedure is same. You will write down the expression for the action, extremize it, and get again the Euler-Lagrange equations of motion. And in that Euler-Lagrange equation of motion, if you put that L, you will get the Maxwell equations. So del mu f mu nu is equal to 0 is the Maxwell equation. Now, so your full Lagrangian will be psi bar I gamma mu del mu minus m psi. This is the Dirac part, free electron interactions. Minus 1 by 4 f mu nu. This is the free part for the Maxwell equations. And E psi bar gamma mu psi a mu is the interaction between Dirac and Maxwell. So this is the full Lagrangian which will describe all the electromagnetic phenomena that is happening in nature. Now, but please appreciate the beauty of this thing. What we have done, we have not put this interaction by hand. We have started with the Dirac equation and said that my Lagrangian should be invariant under local gauge transformation. And that forced me to introduce this E psi bar gamma mu psi a mu, this interaction. And once the a mu field is there, I must introduce a kinetic term for that field also. But this can be, as I am saying, then be done in a more mathematically rigorous way by using the method of comparator. Okay, but that's a different story, right? So, if you take the full Lagrangian and use the Euler-Lagrange equation for the a mu field, you will get del mu f nu equal to J nu. So J nu is the current. And this equation you can see in the book by classical electrodynamics book by Jackson, right? And so where J nu here is nothing but E psi bar gamma nu psi. So the Dirac field, right, is the source of the Maxwell field, F mu nu. You need a charge particle, right, or charge E, charge current to have a Maxwell fields, right? So this is, I mean, you know, Dirac is working as a source term for the Maxwell equation. So this is beautiful. Everything is so finely coming out, and this interaction term, you know, which you have got here, E psi bar gamma mu psi is the where is my cursor? Yeah, this is J mu A mu. So J mu A mu is the interactions, and you know, this is you can see in the book by Jackson also that you will not get the interaction, this you know, current in terms of Dirac field, but you will get J mu A mu, that is the interaction between the electric field and the charge particle. Okay, so that is what is the story. Now once you know this Lagrangian, now the story is same. Once you know the Lagrangian and you know psi as its you know dynamic variable, what will you do? You will operate psi as a promote that psi as a operator, right? And once you know the Lagrangian, you can take the derivative of the Lagrangian with respect to del L del psi dot, like again del L del Q dot gives you the conjugate momentum in classical physics. So you know again the dynamical variable psi, promote them to operators by taking the derivative of L with respect to psi dot, you get the momentum, conjugate momentum variable, promote that also to an operator, and put the quantization condition for the scalar field, right? And this is the quantization conditions you will need to put, right? And you know, this is the quantization condition. One thing you must remember, in case of, you know, in case of scalar field, we have taken the quantization conditions as a commutator of these two dynamic two operators as the commutator to quantize. Now in case of Dirac field, what you have to do, only difference is anti-commutator. So AB anti-commutator is AB plus BA, unlike commutator AB minus BA. So that is the only difference. Why you need to take commutator, anti-commutator? There are two reasons. Unless you take the anti-commutator, if you write down the, you know, total Hamiltonian for the Dirac field in terms of annihilation and creation operator, like for the scalar we did, H we wrote in terms of the A dagger A or number operator. Similarly, you can try to write down the Hamiltonian operator in terms of the annihilation and creation operators. Unless you take an anti-commutator, you will see the free Hamiltonian will not be positive definite. So that is reason number one to take the anti-commutator. Other reason is that unless you take the anti-commutator, you will not be, since they are spin half particles, Dirac equation describes spin half particles. Now, unless you take the anti-commutator, you will not be able to implement the Pauli exclusion principle. Pauli exclusion principles, you know, will not allow two identical particles in the same state. So unless you take this for the spin half particles, so unless you take the anti-commutator, that will not happen. You will violate the Pauli exclusion principle, because I'll give a comment there. You will violate that. So that is the reason you have to take anti-commutator. So once you take the anti-commutator, that is what you got the quantization conditions, and then again you can define a vacuum where, you know, creates an annihilation operator operates and gives you 0. And from this, as we did same parallel work, if you do from the anti-commutation relations of the fields, right? This psi and psi bar, psi and psi dagger fields, you can expand this. I'll show you the expansion. You can expand them in terms of annihilation and creation operators, and got the anti-commutation relations for the annihilation and commutation relations. The story is very parallel, only little complications because of the anti-commutation relations and all that. Now, for the Maxwell equations, again, in the Maxwell equation, A mu is the dynamical variable, make them operators. And if you know the Lagrangian, you can calculate the conjugate momentum and put the quantization conditions. And here you are again putting in the quantization condition commutator, not anti-commutator, because Maxwell, the quanta of the Maxwell equations, the photons, they are bosons, they are spin 1 particles. So again you put the commutation relations, and then but here there are few complexities because of the gauge freedom of the Maxwell equations. You have to make a choice of gauge like Coulomb gauge and covariant gauge, right? Mostly it is up to, you can work in covariant gauge and get the results which will be same as if you choose the Coulomb gauge, of course. Now the Dirac field psi, as we have expanded the the scalar field in terms of annihilation and creation operator, you can do the same for them. This part is same as we did. Now you will have annihilation operator APS for S, because this particle has spin. The S can take two values, plus half or minus half, so there must be a sum over S. So except that integration, there must be a sum over spin variables. So d cube p 2 pi cube 1 by 2 EP. APS is the annihilation operator, and USP is the Dirac solution of the Dirac equations. E to the minus IP dot x was already there. And then see, in the Dirac equations, you can have electron and positron. So this psi field contains a annihilation operator. This will kill an electron. And there is a creation operator BPS dagger that will create a positron. And psi bar will just do the opposite. It will have a APS dagger which will create an electron, and BPS which will kill a positron. So this psi and psi bar field, it can do 4 jobs. You see, create an electron, annihilate an electron, create a positron, annihilate a positron. So there are 4 operators, because for each electron you need in annihilation creation, and positron you need annihilation creation. So there are 4 annihilation creation operators, right? And for the photon, you can have the same kind of expansion, and as I was saying, you'll see in the when we did the scalar field, the USP, VSP, these were all 1. So that is why you in the Feynman diagrams, you are just putting a 1 there for the external line. Now you have to put this USP or VSP like that. Now, and USP, VSP, they satisfy certain relations. Now for the Maxwell field, you do the same expansion. D cube k by 2 pi cube 1 by 2 k0. I have written the energy of the photon is k0, I am saying, right? Because it is massless particle, so its momentum and energy will be actually same if it is on shell. And then there must be a sum over polarization. There, in case of electron, there is a sum over spin polarization, because photon can have 2 polarizations. AK lambda, that will kill a photon, and this epsilon mu k, that is the polarization of the vector for the photon, and e to the ik deluxe is there. Similarly, here this AKS dagger will create a photon, and epsilon lambda star will then if you see with the creation of the photon, there is the factor is epsilon mu lambda star. So whenever a photon will be produced, in some reactions, in case of whenever a photon will be, that means in the external line, and if it is produced, then you have to put epsilon mu lambda star, which you put 1 in case of a scalar particle. And when a photon will be killed, right, then for that external line, you have to put epsilon mu lambda in place of 1, which you used for this scalar field. Similarly, when an electron will be, annihilating, for incoming electron, you have to put USP, not 1. Incoming electron means which is coming and getting killed. For the outgoing positron, you have to put VSP, not 1. For the outgoing electron which is created, you have to put U bar SP. And for a outgoing, incoming positron, right, you have to put VS bar P, not 1. So these are the main difference with the scalar field that is coming into the picture. Now, I can again use the same procedure and calculate the fermion propagator for the electrons or positrons, which you can see will be I P slash. P slash is nothing but it is gamma mu P mu. Gamma mu is a matrix. You have seen it earlier. Gamma mu, P mu, and P mu is a 4 vector. So it is gamma mu, P mu. For the photon propagator, that means whenever there will be an internal line in a diagram, for the photon, I'll put minus I G mu nu. This is the metric tensor by K square. This I epsilon you can neglect when you will be using in the Feynman diagrams. And normally this fermion propagator in the fermion diagram are denoted by solid line, and photon propagator normally are indicated by this kind of wavy line. Now, so at this moment now, for the external line, what I should use in the Feynman diagram, I should use USP for incoming electron, U bar SP for the outgoing electron, VSP for the outgoing positron, V bar SP for the incoming positron. For incoming photon, I should write epsilon mu lambda, not 1, as I am repeatedly saying we have done for scalar particle. For outgoing photon, I should use epsilon mu lambda star. So I know what should I use for the external line of the Feynman diagrams. I will give you an example. Now for the fermion propagator, our internal line, I will use this expression. For the internal line in the photon, I will use this expression. Now what is the vertex? Vertex, as I said, you take the interaction part of the Lagrangian, which is E psi bar gamma mu psi A mu, multiply by I, and delete all the fields. So what will be remaining? I E gamma mu. So I E gamma mu will be the vertex, electromagnetic vertex for Feynman diagrams. And this vertex has a basic structure is, you see, two fermion field is between psi bar and psi, both are fermionic field. So two fermionic field indicated by solid line and a wavy line which is indicated by the photon. And this is the basic structure. Each vertex you have to maintain this, then you will not make any mistake in drawing the Feynman diagram, right? Two solid and one wavy line, because interaction has that demand. It has told you which is derived from the local gauge invariance. See the power of the local gauge invariance. You got the interaction, and then when you use the Feynman diagrams, two fermion, so two solid line, one wavy lines, because two fermion and one photon has come from the interactions. If you by mistake, if you write in the vertex like three solid line, that will indicate that you have three fermion, but interaction doesn't allow that, right? So it is, you cannot, this is wrong. If you use two wavy and one solid, that is also wrong, because two wavy will means that there are two photon lines. That is not there. So you cannot write two wavy and one solid. All right. Similarly, you cannot write three wavy lines, because interaction doesn't have three photon lines, right? So you cannot, if you write three wavy lines, that will be also wrong. Only possibility which nature has, given us is that two solid, one wavy lines. That's it. And once you remember that, you will not make any mistake. Once you know the Lagrangian density, you can write down the expression for the action, right? And once you know the expression for the action, then action is dimensionless. If you keep action is dimensionless, then you will see that this psi field we have a mass dimension 3/2, fractional mass dimension m to the 3/2, and this psi bar will have 3/2. So 3/2, 3/2, 3, and mu, this is a vector field, it will have a dimension 1. So this has a dimension mass 4. So E is dimensionless. This E is strength is dimensionless. Since we are using the natural unit, their electric charge is actually dimensionless. Okay, and as I said, the coupling constant must not have negative mass dimension. Then your theory will not be renormalizable. But you see here the beauty of this interaction which we got from the local gauge principle. It is maintaining the dimensionlessness of the coupling constant. So everything is fine. And this QED, the Nobel Prize for this, was given to Feynman, Tomonaga, and Schwinger for renormalizing this QED in the higher order loop corrections. So that's a separate issue, and that's need a special technique to evaluate those things. Okay. Now, so as I said, if you have an incoming electron, from the field expansion, you have seen USP you have to write, because in the field expansion psi, this was associated with the annihilation operator. For the outgoing electron, you have to write U bar SP. There are expressions for this. If you solve the Dirac equation, you will get what is U, what is B. For the incoming positron, you should write V bar S, and for the outgoing positron, you should write VSP. Similarly, for the incoming photon, it is epsilon mu lambda. For the outgoing photon, epsilon mu lambda star. Now, you see, so everything is, now everything is at your hand. So know the for any Feynman diagrams, as I said, you have three ingredients: the external lines, which I get from the expansion, right? Like, with annihilation, this USP, this will give me the external line, which I have discussed in detail. So external lines, these are the external incoming and outgoing line means external lines. I know the vertex, i.e. gamma mu, and I know the propagators. So I will be able to draw the Feynman diagrams. Now, let me tell you here is that when you do the calculations, any calculations in quantum field theory, you just look at the Lagrangian and you can draw the diagrams. But whether the diagrams will be right or wrong, that you will know. Whether you will draw a right diagram or not, that guidance will come from the vertex. As I said, in any vertex, if you not draw two solid and one wavy, your vertex will be wrong. And this is coming from the basic interactions. Now, so all the what should be the internal line, what should be the external line, and what should be the vertex. Now, let us apply this for our QED theory. Now, this matrix element expression for the scattering matrix I have derived, and it is written here. Now, this HI here, HI is the interaction Hamiltonian. I know the interaction Lagrangian, E psi bar gamma mu psi a mu. The local gauge invariance has given me this Lagrangian. So the interaction Hamiltonian I know, E psi bar gamma mu psi a mu, right? So I know that. So I know what should I put in this HI, right? I know all these things. So this is the general expression, as I have been saying repeatedly. This is valid for any interaction. Just to replace your HI and do the calculations. Okay. Now, suppose I take the first term of this. First term will be d4x1, and then time order product of the HI at x1, right? At the same. Now, Li, the Lagrangian is psi bar gamma mu psi a mu. Please note that argument of all these fields, psi bar, psi, and a mu, all are x, same point, right? That is the vertex. If I am deleting these fields, I am multiplying by I. That is the vertex I am getting. So all the arguments of all these fields are same, x. They are the local fields, local interactions. So local fields. So all the arguments are x, not x1 or x2. Or if x1, then all are x1. Okay, because they are meeting at the same point, at the vertex interaction point. Interaction points actually, vertex is actually indicates you the possibility of emission of or absorptions of the particles at that particular point. Now, the basic thing, let me just mention here, is that if you solve the this Lagrangian for the Maxwell equations, this is the Lagrangian for the Maxwell equations. If you write down the expression for the action, and then extremize it and get the Euler-Lagrange equations, that will become the Maxwell equation. Now, if you solve that, then the solutions will give you the wave nature of the light, right? Now, what we have done here is that from that L, I had the in the L, I had the dynamical variable a mu, which I promoted to an operator, and from this L, I have taken the derivative of a mu dot, and I got the conjugate momentum. I have promoted that to operator, and then when mu and pi mu, I have put the quantization for the mu and pi mu, right? Then I have quantized the field, right? And at that point onwards, actually, I am going from wave nature of light to the particle nature of the light. So this mu field, you see, the operators, the AK and AK dagger, they will create or annihilate photon, because this mu is an operator, right? Is an operator. So from that point onwards, I am getting the existence of the photon, which was the nature of light, electromagnetic waves we need to take when we describe the photoelectric effect. That is what Einstein did in 1905, and that was his actually his Nobel Prize. So this is, in some sense, is an excellent step, because before that people thought that Maxwell equations is valid for valid, and it will for all kinds of phenomena. I mean, Maxwell equation can describe all kinds of phenomena, right? But then Einstein showed that the boundary of validity of the Maxwell solutions by describing the photoelectric effect when the classical solution, electrodynamical solutions of the Maxwell equation fails. So then mu, this when we operate, promote this mu to an operator and conjugate momentum to the operator, and then put the boundary conditions, quantization conditions, we have got the existence of the photon. So that's an important point. Now this S1 field, if you S1 field, if you can, it is just simply psi bar, it is just Hi. So this is psi bar gamma mu psi mu, right? Just one single at the point x1. Now this psi bar, by psi bar field, I can split into two parts. One part will contain the annihilation operator, right? This part will contain the annihilation operator, and this part is the creation operator. Similarly, psi, I can split into two. One is annihilation and other is creation. Psi plus will annihilate, as I mentioned when I discussed the this theorem, Week's theorem, that psi, we have phi there. We have please split that into two terms. One is annihilation and creation. Psi plus will contain the annihilation part, and minus will call the creation part. Similar technique we are using here. Psi bar I will also break into annihilation and creation part, and also mu I can break into annihilation and creation part, because they contains those two parts. Okay. Now this, when you put that, break that in this form, you will see that psi bar plus will contain a annihilation operator, and then minus is containing a creation operator, right? Now you see what is there then, a creation, annihilation, or either this all plus means that at the particular point x1, an electron and positron and a photon can be killed, right? That is what is you are getting from the first term. But just I will argue this first term doesn't give you any physical process. Let me see why. Tell you why. Because this, here what you have, two fermion field and one photon field. So I can denote like one photon field and two fermion field, right? And let us consider a physical process is contained here, and that physical, possible process which is contained there, and let us see whether it is possible or not. See here, you had an electron, and that electron is with a momentum p, can emit a photon, right? So this is an incoming electron emitting a photon, which is an outgoing photon, and then you have a outgoing electron also. The momentum of the photon is q, 4 momentum. So, and the 4 momentum of electron, incoming electron is p, and the outgoing electron is p prime. So this is a reaction like E minus going to E minus photon. So as if an electron is going, free electron is going, and it's just emitting a photon. This cannot happen, right? Why it cannot happen? And this process, if you see carefully, is there in this product. What you have to do? You have to pick up from here a term where there is a electron is, incoming. That means you should have a term with psi plus. So you see there must be a term here with psi plus. So where is that? This is a psi plus. There may be a psi plus also. So psi plus and A minus, psi bar minus, right? And you will have it. This is very small, looking very small. So let me just increase it. Actually, this one, you see, a psi bar plus that will kill an electron, incoming electron, and then mu is creation of a photon, and psi mu will, this will, no, not psi bar minus I need, so not that. So minus is where? Psi bar, this one, right? Psi minus this one. So, you know, this, all possible processes are there, and this is one of the process. Now, P prime plus Q. And this momentum P, I can write EP, the temporal part of the 4 vector, and 3 momentum P. Similarly, P prime, so this vector should not be there. EP prime and 3 vector P prime. And Q is EQ and Q, right? Is the 4 momentum for the photon, which is energy of the photon and momentum, but they will be same because they are massless, as I mentioned here. And this EP will be, you know, P square plus M E square, my mass of the electron, and EP prime will be P prime square plus M E square. Now, let us see why this process is unphysical. This process is unphysical because I can write P equal to P prime plus Q, I can square it. If I square it, then it is 4 momentum square, and I have shown you the 4 momentum square is nothing but the rest mass. In the very first class I have shown. Pi prime square, P prime square plus Q square plus 2 P prime dot Q. But remember, this is a 4 vector product. P prime square is again mass of the electron, because it is the P prime was the momentum in the final channel. Its 4 momentum square is invariant. It should give me the mass of the electron. Q square is the 4 momentum square of the photon, which should be 0 because photon doesn't have any mass. And then 2 P prime Q prime. So first 2, they are temporal component, EP prime Q minus P prime dot Q, 3 vector. Now, if you solve this equation, you will get cos theta equal to EP prime EQ by P prime Q. But EQ is equal to Q because photon doesn't have any mass, energy will be equal to mass. So this cos theta is EP prime by P prime, which is P prime square plus M square by P prime. So certainly this is greater than 1. So if cos theta can never be greater than 1 for a real thing, so this kind of process will not take place. Just a free electron cannot emit a photon. Of course, in presence of certain field, it can emit a photon, which we call the radiation or the Bremsstrahlung. Okay, but free photon cannot do that. So since first term of this, you know, S matrix, first term of this S matrix X1 is not giving me any physical process. Now let me consider the second term. And second term will be quite, you know, complicated. So this is the second term, right? And as I said, when you take see, everything is there, in fact. If I take the second term, then it is time order product of 2 Hamiltonian. So psi bar gamma mu psi mu at x1, psi bar gamma mu psi mu at x2, time order product. And Wick's theorem tells us that time order product is equal to normal order product plus all possible combination. This you remember. I am applying that only. So first will be the normal product, right? Normal product. Now, normal product of all this. Now, you see, x1 and x2, right? X1 and x2, this is the Hamiltonian at x1 and this is at the Hamiltonian at x2. So this, since I have not, in the first possibility, is the normal product of all. And there is no contraction, you know, because no contraction is also a possibility, right? So unless I contract, I don't get a propagator, right? Unless I get a propagator, there is nothing to, you know, communicate between point x1 and x2. So it will give me a discrete diagram like a mu field means the Wavy-line photon and electron positron, one possibility. But these are 2 disjoint object. One is for this, other is for this. They are not talking to each other, these 2 points. So those are also not physical process. So S2U is not S2A. The term without any contraction is not giving me any physical process, because unless I contract, there is no communication between the point x1 and x2. Just there are two separate vertex, but they are not talking to each other. So then this one I don't consider them. Okay. Now second term, let us see. Now normal order product of possible contraction. So one possibility is that psi I can contract with psi bar, and other is this psi bar I contract with psi. Never contract a psi and mu field, because that will not give you anything, because contraction means a propagator. So the propagation should be by same particle from x1 to x2. In the middle, the particle cannot change its identity. It's not possible. So one possibility is that psi and contract with psi bar, and here other possibility psi bar is I contract with psi. But when I contract psi to psi bar, it will give me a fermion propagator, right? And psi bar to psi, that will also give me a fermion propagator. And what is the fermion propagator? That fermion propagator, I have written down the term for you. This is the fermion propagator. So this will give you this kind of a term, okay, which I will denote by SF. So this will give you a fermion propagator. This will give you a fermion propagator. So there will be two terms. What will happen? These two will get cancelled then, right? That is one possibility. Other possibility is I contract the mu field, right? Mu field I'll contract. That will also give me a physical process, right? And just see, when I am contracting the mu field, that means the photon will come in the internal line. So this kind of term will not be able to give me process like Compton, because Compton, you see, photon electron goes to photon electron, right? That means photon and electron has to be the external line. But when I have contracted the photon field here, it will be in the internal line, not in the external line. So this will not give me a Compton kind of process. So I'll show you an example. With experience, you will see what is the kind of process going to come. Depending on your contraction. Here I will be getting a Compton kind of process, because I have contracted psi field, and mu I can get in the then external line, which will give me photon. Okay. Now this is contraction in pairs, right? Or single pair contraction. Now there will be a possibility of contraction of the double pair, right? Like this psi bar, and at the same time this mu I can contract. Then what will happen? Only what is remaining uncontracted parts give me the external line. So I have uncontracted fermion, and that is only one. So I have one uncontracted, that is external fermion line, and then two contracted, means I should have one fermion propagator because of this psi bar contraction, and another photon propagator because of this mu contraction. So at the point x1, from point x1, I have two propagator, two internal line. One is this wavy line, other one is the solid line, corresponding the contraction of mu field and psi field. And then this will be the kind of Feynman diagrams. You will see that. Okay, this is the Feynman diagram, because I have only one external fermion line. And note here again in this diagram, you have two fermion line to one photon, two fermion line. Okay. So this is keeping you a nice guidance to draw correct diagram. Other possibility is that I contract the psi bar field and another psi bar field. So only external particle in this case will have the photon, the wavy line. So I will have a photon in the external line, and there will be two fermion propagator, 1, 2. And then again in the external line, x2 point, I have a photon. So at point x1, a photon is meeting with two fermion, but they are internal line, right? And then those internal line will again meeting and giving you a photon at the point x2, right? So, and this is called photon polarizations. You know, other day we are talking about the vacuum fluctuations, right? You know, if this is the vacuum fluctuations. A photon can fluctuate to electron-positron pair, right? It can fluctuate to electron-positron pair, and one can show that this electron-positron pair or virtual pair, they will not form a real bound state. Never form a real bound state. So that is why E plus E minus from the vacuum can pop up, but they will not be stable. One can show that in QCD, quantum chromodynamics, this quark anti-quark virtual pair can be stable. That's a different story. But in case of QED, you know, suppose, you know, there is a very nice rule for cutting the Feynman diagrams also, which is called Katkowski rules, Landau-Katkowski rules. You know, if photon is going giving you two internal lines, suppose I cut this line like this, then as if a photon is giving you an electron and a positron. That is pair productions, right? That is a pair productions, and that pair productions can happen from the vacuum, but that pair will not never be stable. It will be unstable. Okay, but there will be virtual pairs, not a real pairs. Now, what may happen? Since we are talking about time order project, then all possible contraction, and the other contraction will be psi bar will contract with psi will contract with psi bar, mu will contract with mu. So point x1 to x2.
Professor Alam.
Yes.
Yeah. So in this diagram, so photon from the photon actually pair production produces, and after that is it annihilates. So pair annihilation takes place at the same time.
Yeah, no, that stable, it will not be stable. I mean, you know, it will be created, but
yes,
when you get a, you know, say E plus E minus stable pair, that means in the potential you should have a minimum with negative energy. That you will not get, never. But what you will get if you actually this diagram can be calculated, and you know, let me comment here is that when you calculate this diagram, you know, you will have two fermion propagator, right? And then you have a external line. It is coming with a particular momentum, and that momentum will break into two, right? Now one of this momentum will be P1. Let us say another will be P1 minus this Q minus P1. Now you have to, this P1 can vary from 0 to infinity. Now when you integrate this diagram from 0 to infinity, you will get an infinity, and renormalization procedure tells you how to get rid of that infinity. Okay, once you do that, then you get the amplitude for this, right? And you will see that this diagram will give you a branch cut, right? It will give you a logarithmic frame, logarithmic term, which will indicate there is a branch cut. And the branch cut point will start from where this photon energy, that will indicate the photon energy must be equal to sum of the electron plus positron energy. From the point where this sum of photon energy becomes 2 times mass of the electron, from that point the branch cut starts, and that is the indications that this photon is able to create a E plus E minus pair. So yes, what you can do, you can cut this diagram and calculate the amplitude for the pair productions. Okay. And in this SF2, you see, we are talking about the contraction of all possible type. So I contract psi bar with psi with psi bar, and mu with mu. So in this case, all are internal lines, because contraction means internal lines. So there is no external lines, right? All electron goes from x1 to x2, other positron goes x1 to x2, and a photon goes from x1 and x2, and there is no external lines. These kind of diagrams are called bubble diagrams, and actually there is these kind of diagrams you cannot detect by experiments, because there is nothing external. There is no external line, nothing to measure about that, and they are dangerously, you know, they will be giving a lot of divergence. And about this diagram, I have ready-made calculations I can send you. You can see that the point from which pair production is happening is that when the photon energy is becoming the you need the minimum photon energy, which will be energy of the electron plus positron mass, means 2 times the mass of the electron. Now but you know, in the vacuum again, suppose there is nothing, a photon cannot go and produce you a E plus E minus pair. You know, it cannot do, because if you apply this method there, a photon is just breaking to E plus E minus pair, you will see you will violate the again energy momentum conservation. Like here we got theta, cos theta greater than 1, that means theta is not real. You will get a similar kind of problem. That pair production will take place. E plus E minus, sorry, photon will produce a E plus E minus pair, provided you have some external field. In presence of field, that pair production will be possible. Okay. Now you see, so this is the how you get all the terms. Now I'll concentrate more on the term SB2. What was that? That was when I contracted this 2 fermion field. Okay, 2 fermion field I have contracted. Now what I do, this is a very clumsy calculations, I mean algebraically, and let me tell you, you should do once to get the feelings, otherwise it's very difficult. So psi field, as I said, I will break it to psi plus and psi minus. Psi bar I will break to psi bar plus and psi bar minus. Mu I will break to psi mu plus mu minus. So what I am doing here, in this psi and psi bar, when I am contracting, I will get a fermion propagator, SF. That is what I have said, SF x1 minus x2. And its momentum space representations I have given you is again, let me just draw your attention there. That is I p slash plus m by p square minus m square plus I epsilon. This is the momentum space representation of that SF. And whenever you write down the amplitude to calculate the cross section, you should use the momentum space wave function, okay, or momentum space propagator. So let me tell you that SB2, right? So I have contracted this psi field, so that will give me a fermion propagator SF. I am calling it SF for simplicity. And then this psi bar and mu, I'll split in terms of plus and minus components. Plus contains the annihilation operator, please remember. Minus contains the creation operators. This is little odd. Why minus is creation and plus is annihilation? That is the convention was historically used by Heisenberg. So, and that is same is going on. So, and so what I do here, I contracted and got the SF, and I have put psi bar in this, psi as this, and mu as this. If you put that, you will get a huge expression, and that huge expression is this. I don't know whether you can see it full. So this is the huge expression. Okay, many terms are there. Okay, that means, you know, when you write down this, follow the proper grammar and write down the expression for the S matrix and explicitly put in terms of annihilation and creation you know, operators. We have taken, you know, here the term for n equal to 2. N equal to 2 means it will only give you the process going 2 going to 2. Right? It will not give you a process which 3 going to 3. It will not give you, because then if you want to do that, then you have to take higher order diagrams. 2 going to 2 is, you see, it's long enough. Now, this term itself will give you all the process, electromagnetic process that is taking place in nature. All, right? And here is an example. So when you took this SB2, right, you written down in terms of A plus and A minus operators, you got this. Now I'll draw your attention to this 2 term, you know, the term which I have just marked by this arrow, red arrow, and a diagram. this contains, you know, psi bar minus, right? Psi bar minus, mu minus. So mu minus means photon is created. Psi bar minus means an electron is created. So photon is created, electron is created, and there is a SFX1 minus X2 propagator. That means there is a fermionic propagator, and then a photon was killed. And then a psi plus contains electron annihilations, electron is killed. So this diagram tells you, right, something like a photon electron going to photon electron. This is a Compton process. And if you see, you will get all other electronegative process which can take place, you know. So this electron going to electron plus photon going to electron plus photon, this is a process. Right? Now, how do I draw the diagram? A photon and electron, right? When a photon and electron are in the external line, the internal line has to be a electron. Why? That is because, as I said, my basic building block is 1 photon, 2 fermion. So this, when I have an electron and photon, you have given me an electron and photon in the external line. By wavy line, I draw a photon. By a solid line, I draw an electron. I come to the point where they meet. From there, I must have a solid line, fermionic line, because basic interactions has told me that 2 fermion, 1 photon is allowed. Then I come to the point x2, and at the point x2, you have said a electron and is a photon emitted, a photon and electron emitted, right? That's it. Similarly, I can have this process can take place in a different way also. A photon and a electron. Right? A photon is coming, and that photon is breaking it into, say, E plus E minus pair, because 1 photon, 2 fermion is allowed, and another electron was going. This positron has come, killed this electron, and made another photon. So this is also a possible procedure. But please note, when I have drawn this diagram, this is always kept fixed, that 1 photon, 2 fermion, each vertex. So these are the 2 possible diagrams. Now, how do I write down the expression for this IMF, right? This matrix element which I need to calculate to get the cross section. Very simple. You see, I have told you for an outgoing electron, if you go 2 pages, 3 pages back, outgoing electron, I should write a U bar P prime. I have written that. U bar P prime. U bar P prime. Then I meet a vertex. That vertex is, I have seen, minus IE gamma mu, minus IE gamma mu. Now then, a photon is emitted. And I have shown you, told you that photon emitted means it should be epsilon mu lambda star with a momentum k prime. Done. Now there is a propagator, and propagator's momentum is p plus k, because at each vertex energy momentum has to be conserved. So this is k, this is p, then this momentum has to be p plus k. Now in the photon propagator, in place of p, which I have written earlier, I put p slash plus k slash by p plus k whole square minus m square. Then I meet another vertex, and that vertex is minus IE gamma nu, minus IE gamma nu. A photon is killed. A photon is killed means it should be epsilon nu k, not star, and an electron is killed means it should be UP. Plus, now this one. Again the same thing. A photon was, created, U bar P, and then the vertex minus IE gamma nu. Electron was created, U bar P prime, IE gamma nu is the vertex, a photon epsilon nu, and then same propagators and so on. Okay, so this is the amplitude this amplitude you get. Now, one thing you must remember, that as I said, this gamma is a matrix, right? And so is this U are column matrices. So when you will have matrices, you should maintain the order of the matrices properly. Otherwise, when you multiply, you will not be able to multiply them. I mean, you will make a mistake, and then multiplication will become difficult. So this IM you can write by using this procedure. And then what you have to do from this IM, you have to get the mod square, M square. Once you got this M square, you put it there, you get this d sigma d omega. That is the cross sections which you get from the starting from the Feynman diagram. Now if you follow this procedure, right, what I have said, you will be able to extract all kinds of electromagnetic process from the S matrix which I have written down. And for quantum electrodynamics, this method will work extremely well, unlike quantum chromodynamics, where perturbative theory may not be valid. But in electrodynamics, the perturbative theory is very much valid, because the coupling constant here, the E, and E is very small, because E square by 4 pi in the natural unit, that is the what is called the fine structure constant, and the fine structure constant is 1 by 137, which is much less than 1. So the perturbation series converges there, and this result will be very much valid. And the beauty of the whole thing is, you see the whole Lagrangian which we have got for the QED, that Lagrangian we got from the local gauge invariance. We have not put in this interaction by hand. Now, one can show that E psi bar gamma mu psi mu, this in the non-relativistic limit, actually you can show that this will give you the Coulomb potential E square by r, right? So this is beautiful that you get it not by putting by hand, but by the symmetry of the gauge principle. Now, this little Lagrangian, which is called the QED Lagrangian, in principle, it will be able to describe everything which you see around you. It should be able to describe you why the sky is blue. From there, you will be able to see that blue light scatters more. From there, in principle, you will be able to understand whole of condensed matter physics, because there the relevant interactions is electromagnetic interactions. You will be able to understand the atomic molecular physics, and you will be able to understand the whole of chemistry, because that is also electromagnetic interactions. This simple Lagrangian can, in principle, I am saying, because there may be problems in condensed matter physics or in chemistry where the collective effects are very important, then you may have trouble. But in principle, you know the interactions of solid state physics, chemistry, atomic and molecular physics. But beauty is that you get it by local gauge invariance principle. And once you know that L, you can calculate your Hamiltonian. Let me just tell you. And if you put that in your expression for S matrix, and just follow the procedure which I have said, and use the Weeks theorem very carefully, that time order product is the normal order product and all possible contractions, and then you have all possible contraction, and for the uncontracted field, you write the fields in terms of annihilation and creation operators, right? Like psi bar, psi plus and psi minus. So psi plus will kill a particle, psi minus will create a particle, and that will killing means that particle is coming as incoming, and creation means it is going outgoing. So all kinds of scattering process you will be able to calculate by using this kind of approach. In principle, there should not be any problem. But now the problem is, does it mean that since I know the whole of electromagnetic interactions, they are all the problems of solid state physics, all the problems of the chemistry is solved? It's not. It's not, because this what we are talking about. We are talking about the interactions which is taking place in vacuum, in isolated environment, right? Because this Hamiltonian and the Lagrangian, all the dynamical variables which we have written is fine. But then suppose you want to, starting from here, suppose you want to find out how a phase transition takes place in certain system. In a first order phase transition, why suppose you want to understand why there are discontinuities in the entropy or discontinuities in the energy density when a first order phase transition takes place. Certainly, this theory will not be able to explain that, because when you have many body you have in the many body problems, you know, there will be collective effects coming up, and that's also very difficult to solve. So this, what I mean by this, it contains the, you know, whole of chemistry. By that I mean, in principle, you know, the basic interactions which takes place in chemistry, solid state physics, and atomic and molecular physics. That is what I wanted to mean. Okay, but suppose you want to see why the discontinuity in the phase in the entropy density will come in a first order phase transition, that you cannot do from this, because then you need different techniques to solve, because many body environment, there will be a system, you know, there will be more complex interactions also. Okay, so I think today I stop here, but let me just tell you one thing, that once you are, whatever I have discussed is fine, but when you will do some calculations or draw the Feynman diagrams, you don't go through all this. What you do, you start with the Lagrangian, and to start with the Lagrangian, if it's the scalar Lagrangian, you know that its propagator is I by p square minus m square. You know how to find out the vertex, and you know for scalar all the external lines are 1, and that is the ingredient of the Feynman diagram. So with that, you draw the diagrams and calculate m, put in the cross sections. For spin half particles, you know the propagator is I p slash plus m by p square minus m square. For vector, you know the propagator I have written minus I g mu nu by q square. So you know the propagator. Internal line, you know. External line, I have showed you very clearly today. Either it will be, external line will be represented by u bar, v or v bar. In case of photon, is epsilon or epsilon mu star, epsilon mu or epsilon mu star, right? So and the interaction vertex is minus I e gamma mu. And in the nature, you have particles like scalar, vector, and spinors. So if you remember these few things, like what will be the propagator for a fermions, what will be the propagator for a scalar, what will be the propagators for a vectors, how to calculate the vertex, and what are the external lines. These everything I have discussed. Then just at looking at the Lagrangian, you should be able to draw the diagrams and just calculate the m. Actually, whatever other things I have discussed, you don't need in your calculation, right? But when you are learning for the first time, you should know, so that you will have confidence to draw the diagrams, and also it will guide you not to draw wrong diagrams. So that is the whole issue, which is very important to keep in mind. Okay, so I think I'll stop here today. This is a place to stop. Now, this Dirac equations and the Maxwell equations could be discussed in more details to understand, get some more insight into the field. And the elegant way to quantize the Maxwell field is the path integral formalism. That's a very elegant way to quantize it, because quantizations of the gauge field, Maxwell field, is little tricky because of the gauge freedom, right? And that's why path integral formalism is very elegant and can be done. So if some of you want to study more in field theory, so you should learn the thermal, the path integral formalism, and read more detail about Dirac and Maxwell equations. And then you should also learn how to calculate loop diagrams, because in the loop diagrams some kind of divergence will come, and renormalization is a procedure which will cure that divergence, right? So that renormalization procedure is also a very rich physics is there. So that these are the few things. If you learn, then you will be able to do all the calculations. But whatever I have said so far, if you follow closely, then I can tell you one thing: you will be able to proceed to learn those things also. I mean, even you will be able to follow. If you follow a good book, you will be able to calculate this loop diagrams also. That is important. Now from my side, actually coming few days I'll be a bit busy with my various meetings in the institute. Please provide my email ID to all the participants. They are very free to contact me, send me emails. There is absolutely no problem. And in future, sometimes we can, again, if you are interested, we can start this. Okay, so that is where I stop today.
Thank you, Professor Alam, for this nice and very insightful lecture. And now I think the session is open for discussions. I mean, I have a very small question.
Please, please. Yeah.
That um, uh, the whole lecture, in the whole lecture for today, you haven't considered the exact form of these gamma mu matrices. I mean,
Yeah.
we know that this is not an unique choice. I mean, I could have a higher dimensional
Right,
presentation of
right.
the
So,
gamma mu
oh,
matrices.
that
So whether it will encounter any kind of significance or not.
no, nothing. I mean, you are right that there may be higher dimensional, choice of the matrix.
Impression.
That is correct. That will come if I sometimes discuss the Dirac equations. But this matrix. Just let me tell you, the matrix which I have chosen you. There are this 4x4 matrix. This 4x4 matrix. If you in any of your calculations, you consistently use this. Don't go to other representations, everything will be fine. This is called
Okay.
wild representations. There is another one
Yes.
which is called Dirac.
Right.
Right. So that's fine. I mean, it will be fine. I mean, this is one has to be
Yes.
consistent that one should not change the representation. That's it.
Okay.
And higher dimensional representations can be reduced to this. So that is no problem.
So I think there is a question from Ifat Nasreen. Sir, what is the difference between real and virtual particles? Does virtual particles obey causality?
Oh, so real and virtual particle, by that what we mean actually is that the Einstein has given us a relations for the relativistic relations for the energy and momentum. E square equal to p square, c square plus m square c4. Now in our all this calculation we are taking c is 1. So E square is p square plus m square. If a particle will follow this relation, energy momentum relation, that we will call a real particle or on shell particle. If it does not, then we will call it is a virtual particle. And causality should always be valid. You cannot violate causality in relativistic theory. Okay. So actually, when you I don't know if you have done this. Maybe I maybe some point of time I can give you an example of through this Rutherford scattering, electron proton scattering. Let us say the photon. So electron proton scattering, when I am doing, so in the vertex I have, for the time being, let us assume that the field theory is applicable for proton also. So electron and proton is coming, and then, or let us say electron plus positron, right? Electron plus positron is getting scattered to electron and positron. It's electron and positron. So you will have electron and positron in the external line, and the internal line you will have a photon, right? At that photon, if you take the so that photon's 4 momentum will be sum of the 4 momentum of the electron and the positron, right? Because the electron and positron are going, creating a photon, and that photon is again breaking into electron and positron, right? That is the diagram. One of the diagram is there in my S matrix. Now the momentum of the internal photon will be sum of the momentum of the electron and positron, and if you take the sum of the momentum of the electron and positron and square it, it will never be 0. 4 momentum of the sum of electron and positron square will never be 0. But in the internal line, that is the 4 momentum the photon will have. In case of photon, since its mass is 0, 4 momentum square must be 0. But in this particular case, it will not be 0. So that photon is then a virtual photon, which is in the internal line. The photon which are there in the Feynman diagram's internal line, their 4 momentum square will never be 0. It will be a finite non-zero number, right? But photon's 4 momentum square should be 0. But in the internal line, what will come, it will never be 0. So the photon in the internal line of the Feynman diagrams will be always a virtual photon, a virtual particle. Any particle which is in the internal line of the Feynman diagram is a virtual particle, because those particles will not obey the Einstein relation E square equal to P square plus M square. Okay.
Okay, so we can take quite a few questions. So participants, please, I mean, you can ask questions, especially the students. Okay, I think now we don't have any questions. So if there is no more questions, let me thank Professor Alam for this nice lecture again. And now it's the time to over Professor Dr. Khan for the final comment.
Thank you, Dr. Jayanto. This is a very nice lecture. We have that 9 very nice days over this program, and still it is, I think, incomplete. We at the end we got a big basket, that is S matrix, which contains all the information of what is we have learned in 9 days, and still we have to go through that. And all I think, and most of the participants had expressed their interest on this lecture to go to extend it, and they have shared their views on these lectures via email. We have posted yesterday, and they are very much interested to that more sessions should be there. So I, on behalf of the organizing committee, I must request Professor Alam sir to extend this lecture for few more days, if his time permits, because he is in a very busy schedule in his department, and so we must request on behalf of all the participants and from the department to give more time to us, because we are at the very interesting position. Actually, what we have learned, we have a little practically speaking, we have actually no clear idea about this field, and we have started learning this. So at this juncture, we don't want to miss you. So sir, this is today. Unfortunately, due to network problem, I missed a few couple of minutes at the beginning of the program. That was very important. That the sigma Pauli matrices was there, which are very most important. We have been encountering quantum mechanics in our when I was a student. So I missed that, and we'll contact for you for in the next lecture, next session. We will highlight on this so that we have a better understanding of this. And may I now request Professor Mehdi Kalam to a few words.
Dr. Kalam, before you start, let me just tell Dinesh that he wanted a book. Dinesh, the name of the book is Introduction to ADS CFT Correspondence by Nashatase, H. Nashatase, Nasataac, Nasataac, H. Nastase, Introduction to ADS CFT Correspondence. He has a beautiful book and also review articles in the archive. Okay. And let me tell all the So Professor Kalam, please. Then I'll come.
Yeah. First of all, I want to extend my gratitude to Professor Alam that he has a very busy schedule, and despite of that, he is giving us a lot of time, and we are very much grateful to him. and as you told, sir, that you want to extend your lectures, and that's why we expressed to that view to our participant, and they also agreed that they want to extend these lectures.
Mhm.
So would you please tell us that when you will be available for that? You yesterday told that you are preferred to abstain from the weekdays, right?
Right. Yeah. So what I can do, coming weeks, we have several important meetings in our institute, because you know this is parenting time. You have many things to finish in December, and in December, last part is almost every year. I don't know what will happen this year. It's many people go on holidays and all that. So I'll be very happy. I mean, I am also enjoying. So today is 6th of December. Maybe at the end of December I can start again.
Oh, end of December.
Yeah. So because this week and next week we have, and also in between we have this, ZRA, PDF, all this recruitment viva and all that. So
I see.
and this year it will be online. So what will happen that it will take, normally we finish it in 3 days, but this time what will happen, it will take more than 3 days, much more than 3 days. So other years what we do, we make 5-4 interview boards. This year that also may not be possible. So that is why this December is little tricky for me, but I am also enjoying discussing with you. So maybe end of December will be good.
Oh, end of December.
Yeah, I'll confirm you later. But before that, if I can, finish all these responsibilities, I'll contact. Keep all the email IDs, and we'll announce through email. No problem.
Yeah. We have all the participants' mail ID we have.
Sure.
So we'll discuss our next program schedule later on.
Right.
That may be
right. And what I am saying, but whatever I have discussed is for the student, at least it is good enough for keep you busy for the entire month if you work out everything.
And
of course. Actually that will, then you'll be better equipped to to understand the loop diagrams and path integrals and all that. Okay.
Yeah. Of course.
So we are taking this as a study leave.
No, this year, earlier what happened, our session, JRF PDF Pro doctoral program starts in 1st August.